This is Kevin Pruitt, and we have another episode of Rising Tide Startups. And my guest today is Joe Kashurba. Joe, thanks for joining us this morning.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
It's great having you on the show. And Joe, just share with our listeners a little bit, who is Joe Kashurba?
That's a good question. Hey, I've been an entrepreneur since I was in high school. Started my business when in high school. I had a group of friends that had a band, and I filmed them playing at this local restaurant and sold videotapes of them playing to their parents.
Oh, wow. There you go.
And
Go right to the heart of the matter.
yeah, it was a good sort of a good target market that sort of had to buy my videotapes. And that turned into a video production business, which turned into a web design business. And a couple failed startups later, I had built a successful web design and online marketing business. And so now I have that, as well as I have another business where I train web designers and graphic designers about how to grow their businesses. So I have those two businesses going on.
So, I mean, I don't know your exact age, but you obviously grew up kind of in the tech age. So, I mean, you've never known a time that wasn't necessarily available. So how did you, I mean, there so many kids, in high school have access to those things. What was kind of the spark that led you into say, hey, I'm gonna get into from video production to web design? What was kind of that transition?
It was actually totally a looking out into the market and seeing where the need was, because I had this idea to do this video production business in high school after I did these videotapes for my this band, and I learned HTML in order to build a website for that business.
Wow,
My
that happens so often.
Yeah, you do that. What actually happened was my sister had given me for Christmas a Dummy's Guide to Programming book. And there was a chapter in there about HTML, and I learned how to build a website. And it was just the kind of thing where nobody came to me for video production services, but all of a sudden people started asking me about websites. And it was clear very quickly that I needed to pivot in that direction, and that was where there was actually an opportunity.
And as any typical 18-year-old entrepreneur does, they survey the market. I mean, most of them are worried about,
Exactly.
who am I going to take out on Friday night? And you're sitting there trying to say, okay, what's the business process that I need to go through? That truly is amazing. I mean, that's rare in today's market, I think, to have that kind of, I guess, awareness of the market. But it's good to know.
Yeah, yeah.
So tell me, if you and I are getting on an elevator, we're going up about 10 floors. Sell me on the web design, or you also have a website, just joekashurba.com. Is kind of it looks like more like an umbrella, over everything that you're doing right now. So tell me what you do and how your services could help me.
Yeah, absolutely. So the big thing that sort of sets what we're doing apart from what so many other web design and digital marketing companies do is that we help companies really use the internet to grow their businesses. There's lots of companies out there that are maybe dabbling with something online, and we help companies that are ready to use the internet to generate large numbers of leads and massively grow their business, and actually use the internet to its full potential rather than just sort of dabble online or do a little bit of this or that or have a website or something.
So you mentioned earlier you started kind of the video production side, and then the web design grew out of that, just out of like market demand. But so when you shifted kind of into the, okay, how can we help businesses kind of 10x what they're doing, or I don't want to limit it just to 10x, but how can they exponentially grow what they're doing? Was that also born out of your own experiences on your web design company?
Uh, Absolutely. It's been this ongoing process of sort of seeing where the need was and moving in that direction, because at the beginning, there wasn't an online marketing component. There wasn't this idea of actually helping businesses grow. It was just, I'm going to build nice looking websites
Right.
for people. I was doing websites in high school for $300, and it was over time, sort of narrowing in on some industries, narrowing in on, oh, these people are coming to me because they actually want to grow their business, or they want to get this particular result in their business, and narrowing in more on that. And it was from that that I decided to actually add on the online marketing services, sort of gear the web design services more to actually helping businesses make money.
Right.
And it was going in that direction based on what I was seeing out in the market.
I want to circle back in just a second with the kind of idea about 10x, but drill down just a little bit more. I mean, so many times, and let me kind of form the question here before you can answer it. But so many times I see people launching like services, and they say, okay, here's the 10-step process, or here's the 4 ways that you can do this, and it's almost like it has not been born out of experience. But yours seems very different, and to me, that would be the most effective way to coach or to develop a service, is born out of your own pathway that you've walked, to really develop the process. And actually you have kind of a proof, after the fact that this works. And I can show you this works because it worked in my own company.
I think that's a really good point. And that's what's exactly what I've done and what's sort of been happening. There's almost like these 2 tracks where on one track I'm seeing what's working for clients.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have a client that maybe just wanted a pretty website, and then I'd see what we did that got them business,
right?
And then I could focus and do that same thing more for other businesses. But then there's the other piece of actually having to figure out how to grow my own business.
Yeah.
And so many people. It's funny. There's so many people out there that do online marketing or do web design, but they can't get their own clients. They don't know how to market their own business.
Yes.
And so I had to learn that. I went to course after course and seminar and read books and tried all kinds
mm-hmm.
of things and spent enormous amounts of money on marketing to figure that out for my own business. And that was actually before I actually started selling online marketing to clients. I was doing it successfully in my own business. And I could say to somebody, hey, I think you should do ads on Google because I'm doing ads on Google and it's generating, all this money for me.
Right.
And so it was that process. It was the same thing with, just like I built the website for myself for the video production business.
Yeah.
I did it for myself, saw it worked, and then did it for clients. And it's sort of been this process of sort of going in that direction. What worked for me? What worked for clients? What were their needs?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's been an evolutionary process as opposed to me having the idea one day to have a business like this and nothing ever changes. It's evolved.
And I mean, I love the word you just used. I mean, and it also has to evolve to kind of keep up with technological changes and changes on algorithms of Google searches, and I mean all the above. So I love the fact that that's kind of built into your process. So I told you I was going to circle back on the kind of the 10x idea. You mentioned on another podcast, a competitive podcast that is listened to broadly, that you talked about the idea of kind of helping people 10x, but it seemed like that it wasn't just like a factor of 10. It was more of a kind of a broad process. So can you touch on that a little bit? What you mean when you're talking about that type of exponential growth and how you help businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it sort of comes back to, I had mentioned the idea of helping businesses to use the internet to its full potential, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think what sort of, not even just on the internet, but in general, what a lot of businesses do when they're marketing is they just dabble with marketing, or they think of marketing as maybe an expense, or I'm going to spend a little bit on this marketing and it's not going to do much for me. When I'm talking about, I often say 10xing your business,
mm-hmm.
because that requires a different kind of thinking.
Right.
It requires you, if you want to add a little bit to your business, that's doing a little bit more of what you're already doing.
Sure.
If you want to 10x, you have to think totally different.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to 10x your business by dabbling with a little bit of marketing or doing some little thing. You're going to 10x your business by finding one particular marketing strategy that works and really scaling that up,
right.
And giving all of your focus to scaling that up. And so what I do with businesses, and I do this with a client where it's a done-for-you service and I'm helping them with online marketing and it's some construction company, and I also do this with web designers that I'm training to grow their
mm-hmm.
businesses. I help them to identify one particular target market, one particular type of ideal client that they want to go
Yeah.
after, figure out what that client wants, and then choose one particular marketing channel, whether that's Facebook ads or Google ads or something like that, and focus all of their attention on getting that sort of profitable system in place where they can spend $1 and get $2 back,
Yep.
and then you just scale that way up. And that's sort of how you 10x is finding that one thing that you can scale up. So sort of a long answer, but that's
that's
what
great.
that's about.
Absolutely, and I appreciate you kind of drilling down on that, because that, I think, our listeners, regardless of what stage they're in, I think will be very apropos to where, whatever they need to look at as far as marketing is concerned. One thing, what kind of a follow up with that is that, do you build in like a timeline? Like, if you're focusing on one thing, do you say, okay, we're going to look at this for 3 months or 6 months or whatever, versus, I mean, it can't just go on indefinitely. You have to be testing and kind of, looking at the metrics. Is this paying off? I mean, what's built into the system that says, okay, we're going to try this one thing for X amount of time? Or is there kind of a date or a calendar or a rolling 90 days or something you build in?
That's a good question. I think it depends on where somebody is in terms of clarity about what they're selling and who they're selling it to.
Yeah, that's good.
Because if you can only have so many variables.
Mm-hmm.
So say somebody is in a situation where, let's say it's a landscaping company, and maybe they do all kinds of things. They do patios, they do, tree removal, they just do all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So they have a lot of variables in terms of what they're offering. So if that's the case, then we just want to start with one marketing channel and then advertise a variety of those different things to see what works.
Right.
But if somebody's very clear about what they're, they have a particular service they're advertising, a particular ideal client or ideal customer in mind, then it might be the kind of thing where we'll do a couple tests. We'll spend a little bit on Facebook, we'll spend a little bit on Google, we'll spend a little bit on, some other form of advertising, banner ads or something, see what works, and then from there choose what to scale up and what to really focus on. So it depends. I don't know that there's a specific timeline and that kind of thing, so much as it is making sure there's not too many variables that we're dealing with.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. If there's too much to measure, then it's kind of a melange. I mean, you're kind of looking at it and going, how would you even kind of break this down to see what's effective and what's not? But is there one other follow-up question, then we're going to kind of move to another section, but is there a trying to think how to phrase this question. So is there a specific I guess level that you're looking for when you choose a channel? Like is there we're gonna 2 times this, we're gonna 3 times this, we're going to raise it 20%? Is that kind of is there a target in mind, I guess, when you're looking at these different channels? Have you worked that out with the client prior to in the process?
The best arrangements with clients is when we have worked that out. Is when the client has a clear picture of, here's how much I can spend to get a sale,
right?
Or here's how much I can spend per, if I get $10 in business, how much can I spend to get that $10 in business? If the client knows that helps a lot.
Yeah.
Because one of the biggest challenges in working with clients in doing their online marketing for them is not knowing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of businesses don't know that. They haven't done marketing yet.
Right.
They don't really know. And so as much information as I can have about that is valuable. And it depends on the business. Like if it's a service-based business, maybe, like that landscaping business or something where there's some materials involved and there's labor and there's all this stuff, they need to have a lot more ROI because there's all those costs involved. If
Right.
it's somebody selling a course online, maybe 2x is plenty because there's no other cost other than the ads.
Right.
So it really depends.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. And it does depend on where they are and what the specific, marketing industry, products, etc. So thanks for drilling way down in that. I kept asking you follow up after follow up after follow up. You've handled them extremely well. So
Absolutely.
So since you started kind of the web design company, what would you say would be like your highest point that you can look back and say, "Well, that's almost like that was my aha moment, or my we've arrived in, at least in base camp 1."
That's a good question, and it's funny because there's a specific moment, and that was, so I graduated from college, and I'd been doing the web design on the side, but had never it had never made a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And in college, I had this startup company I was trying to do, and it fell apart. And so I graduated with no job lined up, no startup company, just doing some websites on the side. And so I moved back in with my parents, and that was like I set up this makeshift office in my mom's basement, sort of half basement, half garage kind of thing. And that was like really a hard time because, I had friends going to work at Amazon and places like that. And I remember like about 6 months after that is when I had my first month in my web design business where I did $5,000 in a month. And that was the number that I was thinking, okay, that's real money. I can sort of justify having not gotten a job if I can do $5,000 a month. And so I remember driving to a client's office, picking up the check that took me over $5,000 for the month, and literally crying in the car on the way back.
Wow!
Because I hit $5,000 in a month.
Wow. And you probably went back and said to mom and dad, "Hey, by the way, I can make this. This is going to work."
Exactly. That's how I felt, because it was like, they were very supportive and it was great, but I was making $1,000 a month and like, feeling, I remember feeling almost envious of a friend that had a minimum wage job.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking all that money he has coming in, and so
that's funny.
I just remember crying in the car, getting that $5,000 check, and I actually ended up at like $6,000 for that month. And even, 2 or 3 months later, I had my first $10,000 month, and and I've had months a lot bigger than that since then, and nothing has ever been that emotional as that first $5,000 month.
Yeah, it is. That's an amazing story. I appreciate you sharing that with us, and I can, we all can probably put ourselves in that. I mean, I've never had a $5,000 a month on my side gig, so I fully understand what you're looking at. But it is. I just really appreciate you kind of drilling down, and I could almost see the emotion in your eyes as you're sharing that story. You're thinking, I'm back in the basement. I'm on an old Windows computer, and I'm just pecking away and trying to make this thing work. And
exactly.
Yeah, what a great story. So since you started, tell me a couple of pain points or really obstacles that you kind of deal with on a fairly regular basis that are just like speed bumps in the road that even at the level that you're at now. So what are two things that maybe our listeners could speak into to kind of speak in it, like help all boats rise in a rising tide?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of my biggest challenges is sort of productivity and organization still. I'll get into a good routine and have some sort of a system and way to organize my day and everything, and it lasts a month or 2 months, and then I'm not following the system, and I'm sort of trying to figure out what to do. So I still haven't been able to like get a good sort of process in place to organize my day that actually sticks, and organize my sort of what I'm doing on a week-to-week basis and stuff. So that's probably one of the biggest things.
That's it's interesting because my theory is that creatives, and I think entrepreneurs have to be creative. I think it's almost, a system is almost antithetical to how we're wired. So we are creators by nature. We're very good at starting stuff. We're very good at launching. We're very good at the creative ideation phase and the brainstorming and putting things in motion and getting them rolling. We're really often very bad at maintaining things and the operation side of things. That's why we always have to have a wingman that says, "Okay, you're my COO. you're the one that's doing the operation," because I'm really kind of the visionary and the one that's kind of creating the idea, and you're putting the systems in place to make sure that those ideas can come to fruition. So it's one of those things that I think it's our greatest strength can be a weakness too, and you got to have somebody that can kind of step in that void there for you. Would you agree with that?
I think there's a lot of truth to that, and that's something I had never thought about. And then maybe a couple weeks ago, somebody said something similar. You're a creative person. It's sort of it's exactly right. You know, it's not. I'm sort of this. I'm a creative person, but then also I'm a programmer, and so I think about things in terms of like real logical, like computer code, and that's how it sort of in my mind I sort of have this fantasy of my day being like, you know, minute 1 this is what I do, minute 2 this is what I do, and like real robotic. But that is actually counter to my creativity, and my life would be miserable if it actually was that way. So it's a struggle.
Yeah, that wouldn't even last till noon. You know that.
Exactly.
That's that system. So what's another obstacle or pain point that you kind of deal with on a fairly regular basis?
So that's one, and then sort of related to that would be I've heard it referred to as the gray zone. Because I work from home, and because I like what I do, I end up sort of always being in this half working, half not working state.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, you know, I'm always there, even whether I'm away, or even like at nights, you know, say my fiance is going to go do something, she's going to, you know, do the laundry or something, I'll immediately go work, and it's like it should be downtime, but I'm back to working, and I'm jumping back and forth. So that gray zone piece has always been a struggle too.
Have you tried things to kind of alleviate that a little bit? I mean, have you tried to have separate work areas, even an off-site, you know, place that I'm doing my kind of a third place? Like, I mean, I'm not talking about going to Starbucks every day, but you know, this idea that I'm going to rent a cheap little office just to have a place so I can clearly differentiate that or something like that. I mean, so what are some of the things you've used to kind of work on that?
The only thing that's actually a really good idea, not something I like. The idea of trying to be more, have a separate space or something, is not something I've thought about much. That's a really good idea. Most of what I've done is just trying to be more organized, trying to get myself to, you know, sort of before dinner, sort of reorganize things and be done. But that never ends up happening. So I think the idea of having a separate space, or even like, you know, maybe the office room is where I work, and at night maybe I take my computer out of the office room and do, you know, if I'm doing non-business on my computer, maybe I leave this room. That's interesting. I never thought about dividing it like that. That probably would be better than just trying to be better.
Well, I do have a third place coaching program that I just created just now on this podcast. That it's $9.97. So we do take credit cards on our website. So yeah, just something to think about. And so let me follow up just a little bit on this kind of the gray zone, because this I think is a related issue that I think a lot of kind of solopreneurs, solo startups, whatever, face. But how do you handle the social aspect of work? So I mean, it's so easy to kind of get into your introverted self and kind of get head down with your, you know, music playing in the background and just working on your computer. How do you do the networking and engagement? Is your team remote, you know, that you work with? I mean, how do you kind of work those details out, and even engaging with just people, you know, during the day?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. My team has always been virtual.
Mm-hmm.
So because I'm a very introverted person and I like the idea of working from home.
Mm-hmm.
But it is true. I end up sometimes realizing I haven't left the house in 3 days.
I'm wearing the same shirt. That's
Right?
right.
Yeah. Um, and it is and it is a challenge because like my fiance, um, she has a job and actually goes
Yeah.
to a job every day, and so there are some times where like I want to go out, like I want to do something because I've been in the house all week.
Yeah.
She wants to stay in the
That's
house because
right.
she's not in the house usually. So
Yeah. That's
uh,
funny.
so that is a challenge. Two things that have helped a lot are one, going to meetup groups
Mm-hmm.
to meet other entrepreneurs, other people in similar fields and things.
Yeah.
Right after college, meetup groups helped me so much. I met so many cool people and mentors there. So I just went to meetup.com and found a web design one and entrepreneurs one, and that was fabulous.
Yeah.
The other piece is I just try about once a week to have a day where I work at a coffee shop.
Yeah. That's good.
So that there's some interaction.
Kind of get
with
out of
the
the
other
cave,
people.
so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and so that's about once a week is about the amount that it's. I can be focused. I can have all my extra screens here when I'm at home, but
Yeah.
then once a week at the coffee shop, that helps a lot.
Yeah. It's I love Meetup because I host a kind of a 1 day co-working space just on Fridays, just for people that just like you, they're just kind of working by themselves and just a chance to get out. And so yeah, it is. I mean, I think it's a real. There are people that really struggle with that. I think that I mean, obviously you're wired differently, and you can handle the the solo workspace, but people that have gone from an office environment to working at home, I think they really struggle with that. I'm just curious to hear, your answer and maybe how you've dealt with that in the past, and maybe help some of our listeners that might be going through a similar issue like that. But so let's kind of transition here, and I want to get it just a little deeper in your head, and just really hear kind of what the almost the why behind some of the things you do. But who would you say is one person online that it really inspires you, and why?
I would say Eben Pagan.
Okay.
Are you familiar with him?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
He's been really, really valuable. I came across a lot of his marketing materials,
Mm-hmm.
and that was sort of some of his videos on just the idea. It was funny. It was one of those things where I was struggling to get clients and figuring out how to market my business, and I came across some videos of his and talking about how to do marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in watching those videos that I actually had this realization that marketing was something that I could figure out.
Hmm.
And it's an odd thing, but it was like for years I almost didn't even think about marketing because it like wasn't on my radar. I had this limiting belief that it wasn't even possible to figure out. And I watched some of his videos and then bought tons of his courses and bought a bunch of other books, and it was those videos that really got me started learning about marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And having that key marketing realization of I have to look at things from the perspective of the potential client and not from my perspective.
Right. That's great. That is. I mean, it's interesting that we all have to come to kind of a similar realization that you did that says, hey, this is possible.
Yeah.
This is it's kind of what it is called, the imposter syndrome, that you're always dealing with. You're thinking I'm not only fooling my clients, I'm fooling myself, into thinking I can do this. So that is I love that. And that's in all of our interviews, that's the first time that he's been mentioned. So
really,
yeah, that's that, and certainly is fairly well known in that space.
Yeah,
that you mentioned. So is there like a life quote that you have taped up on your computer, or you just kind of like to look at, or that you try to like live by, the specific quote that kind of guides you daily?
That's a good question. One that I don't know if it guides me daily, but one that I often think about is the Jordan Belfort quote. The guy who's the Wolf of Wall Street
Yep.
has a quote that let me see if I can get it right. the something to the effect of the only thing stopping you from getting what you want is the story about why you can't have it.
Okay.
And and that's not exact. It's not exactly word
You know,
for
I could
word,
look it
right?
up.
Yeah, but I think for a long time I had this thought that okay, that was just like one of those feel good kind of quotes, like just sort of a platitude. But what I've realized more and more in life is how really true that is.
Mm-hmm.
How much of the stuff we think is just not true, and how many there's so many times that I've done this and I've talked to people where they'll just have some excuse or something that's total BS. It's not real.
Yep.
It's funny. I have this other business where I train web designers to grow their businesses, and the stuff I hear is fascinating. Like people will tell me, "Well, I can't grow my web design business because in my town people don't buy websites," or people, something that's like it's just not true. They have this idea that's not true, or I had a friend of mine in high school that him and his parents had this business that was they'd grown the business to like 50,000 a month without any marketing, just by sort of word of mouth. And it
Yep.
was like if they had just started marketing, they could have really grown this business. But they had some idea in their mind that that was as big as the market was, and you couldn't grow it. And the and looking back on it, they could have made that business $1 million a month if they would have marketed.
Wow.
But I don't know. I'm constantly realizing more and more how much that quote really is true, and it's not just a quote. It really is the truth.
I mean, I love the web design guys' excuse that there's nobody in town. I'm like, well,
Yeah,
most of your clients probably aren't going to be living in your town anyway. You ever heard of that? This new thing called the internet?
exactly. It's just crazy the stuff I hear, or I help a lot of them with running ads on Google.
Uh-huh.
And people make up these stories like, well, I can't do Google ads because the people who my competitors would just click on them a bunch of times and the ads wouldn't work for me. It would work for you, they'd work for anybody else, but my competitors are too vicious. And it's like like how could that be? That makes no sense. And they don't have any evidence of this, and I just see this kind of thing all the time. Or,
Yep.
I knew somebody who was in Canada, and they had this story that people in the U.S. would never buy anything from somebody in Canada, which I don't think is true.
No.
I
No.
mean, maybe there's a small percentage of people that wouldn't, but they were afraid to market into the U.S. They were afraid to do anything because they had this fake belief that nobody in the U.S. would buy something from somebody who was in Canada.
I mean, it's so related to the whole. I mean, it's kind of this big cloud of, this unbelief and imposter syndrome and everything else kind of wrapped up into one thing that says, I'm really kind of doing this with smoke and mirrors. And when people really open the curtain and look behind, they're not going to see. There's not going to be anything of value back there,
Yeah.
so to speak. So, if you could go back to kind of your pre-startup self, what is one piece of advice that you would tell yourself that you think would have 10x'd you a lot earlier, or would help our listeners as well as they're kind of getting started in their own kind of side business or solo startup or whatever?
I think it's the sales and marketing piece. So, I said I came across some of Eben's videos and started learning about marketing, and that's when that's one of the key moments when things started to take off, although it took me a long time to learn about marketing. I had encountered a variety of things years before that kept saying, you have to learn marketing, you have to learn sales. I read the Rich Dad, Poor Dad books,
Yep.
and he has a lot of other good stuff, but one thing he said in there was you have to learn sales.
Yep.
And I came across that a number of times, and I ignored it, and I said, I'm not going to do it. And so I would have liked to have really spent time learning sales and marketing probably 10 years earlier than I did.
That's great. It is this idea that, I mean, as you were talking there, I was thinking, my product will speak for itself. My work, my service will speak for itself, and that's another lie that I think we tell ourselves too. That
Yes. Well, it's a lie in two ways. One, because yes, people have to see you. You have to get it in front of people,
yeah.
right? but it's also live from the standpoint that, like, when you understand sales and marketing, you can actually create services and products that people want.
What a great point.
Because right, because you actually understand their needs and stuff. And you know, that's a key piece. Like, you have to understand that to create products and services
Yeah.
people want.
What a great way to wrap up today, and just I mean, that alone, that's the $1,000 piece you just mentioned right there in one line. So is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you would love just to share with our listeners? And then let's just wrap up by letting them know how people can find you online.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess sort of to wrap some of those pieces up, I would just say, you know, learn sales and marketing, really invest the time to do that because it's worth it, and be open. You know, if you're somebody that's on the fence at all, or wanting to get into entrepreneurship, just get into it. Get into entrepreneurship, start learning sales and marketing, and sort of see where it takes you. I see so many people, you know, I started a video production business and ended up a million miles away from that,
Yeah.
but that was what I needed to do. And I see so many people just on the sidelines waiting for that perfect business idea to come to them.
Mm-hmm.
And you just need to get into entrepreneurship and start learning and sort of do the pivots that you need to do.
Yep. So is the best place to find you is joekashurba.com, or is it the web design company, or where would you like people to find you?
Yeah, either one. So on the done for you side, where we're actually helping people with their online marketing and actually doing the services for them, that's KashurbaWebDesign.com.
Okay.
And if you're a web designer, an agency owner, a graphic designer that wants to grow your business, you can go to joekashurba.com. We have a 90-minute webinar there that goes into detail on a lot of these things, and you can get in touch that way.
Well, we'll certainly have those listed on the show notes and also on the YouTube post that we'll put up. But Joe, I am just really grateful you taking the time today to share with our listeners, and it just loved the engagement of the interview and just, you know, your responses and just the kind of the raw realness of taking us from your mom's basement to your aha moments and everything in between. So, Joe, thanks again for just helping all boats rise in a rising tide. We appreciate your time.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.